Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening at home. The kind where I slipped into my soft nightdress, curled up against the pillows, and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. But instead, my heart carried the weight of the entire day, long hours, endless chores, and thoughts I hadn't sorted through yet. I wasn't in the mood for laughter, or for closeness, or for anything beyond just lying there in the dim glow of the lamp. My husband, though, noticed everything. He always does. His eyes lingered on me a little longer, searching for something I wasn't ready to give. He walked into the room slowly, not with impatience but with a quiet presence that made me feel both guilty and comforted at once. I could tell he wanted to reach me, to bridge that invisible gap I had created between us. I kept my eyes down, pretending to be lost in thought, hoping he wouldn't push. But that's the thing about love, it doesn't always wait for the perfect moment. Sometimes, it shows up when you least expect it, when your walls are at their highest, and when you're convinced you have nothing left to give. His voice was gentle, almost cautious, as he sat beside me. "You're quiet tonight," he said, not as an accusation, but as a simple truth. I nodded, unable to explain the heaviness I carried. I thought he'd let it go, maybe turn away and let me fade into silence. But he didn't. Instead, he stayed. His hand found mine, warm and steady, and though I wanted to resist, a part of me leaned into it. That simple touch made something shift inside me, like a reminder that I wasn't as alone as my thoughts made me feel. The longer he stayed, the more my defenses began to crack. He wasn't asking for anything, just offering presence, patience, and love in the way only he knew how. The room felt smaller, warmer, charged with a tension I couldn't ignore anymore. My heart raced, not out of fear, but because I realized how deeply he still affected me, even in my weakest moments. And then, before I knew it, the quiet gave way to something else. A single tear slid down my cheek, betraying the feelings I had tried to hide all evening. He caught it with his thumb, not saying a word, just looking at me like he had found a truth I couldn't deny. What happened after that changed the way I saw him, and the way I saw myself in his love. But that's where the night truly began, and where everything I thought I controlled started to slip away. The silence in the room carried a weight that words could not touch. I had thought I could hide behind it, shield myself with quietness, but his presence pressed against me like an unspoken question. My husband's eyes never left mine, and in them, I saw something that startled me, patience mixed with an ache he was trying hard not to show. That single tear I had shed was enough for him to know I wasn't as strong as I pretended to be. And in that moment, I felt exposed, like the walls I had built all day were crumbling right there in front of him. It wasn't always like this between us. There were days when laughter filled our homes so easily, when even the smallest things would make me smile. But recently, it felt as though life had piled more on my shoulders than I could carry. Work, family obligations, the pressure to hold everything together, it all drained me in ways I couldn't explain. And in the middle of it all, the one person who stood beside me the closest was the one I kept pushing away. Not because I didn't love him, but because I was afraid of falling apart in front of him. He seemed to sense that. Maybe that was why he didn't fill the air with words or questions. Instead, he held my hand tighter, his thumb brushing over my skin like he was reminding me I was still here, still with him. I wanted to tell him everything, to pour out the chaos inside my mind, but the words lodged in my throat. All I could manage was a shaky breath, hoping he would understand the things I couldn't speak. My heart wrestled with guilt. How could I explain the distance I had created between us, the way I had let my exhaustion steal moments that should have been ours? I looked at him and wondered if he ever felt lonely too, even when I was right beside him. That thought scared me more than anything, that I might be breaking something I never wanted to lose. The way he looked at me, though, told a different story. He wasn't angry, and he wasn't pushing me for answers. He was simply there, like a quiet anchor in the storm I kept fighting. The more I studied him, the more questions rose in my mind. Why did he stay so patient with me, even when I pulled away? What was he holding back behind those steady eyes? It felt as though he was carrying his own truth, something he hadn't said out loud yet. The night stretched on, and though neither of us moved much, the air between us shifted. His closeness, his calmness, unsettled me in ways I couldn't name. I wanted to lean into him, to let myself break open and trust that he wouldn't let me fall. But something inside held me back, a knot of fear that wouldn't let go. And that was when I realized, this moment was only the beginning of a conversation neither of us could avoid much longer. I could feel the tension in the room shift with every passing second, like an invisible thread pulling us closer yet keeping us apart at the same time. My husband's silence wasn't empty, it was deliberate, almost as if he was waiting for me to open a door I had kept locked for too long. I knew he wanted to understand, but the fear of letting him see how fragile I truly was held me back. What if he saw my weakness as a burden? What if the love I thought was unshakable had already begun to slip through our hands without me noticing? The conflict wasn't just in that moment, it had been building for months. I had buried myself in responsibilities, trying to be a perfect wife, daughter, friend, and employee, yet I ended up failing myself in the process. The exhaustion made me distant, and that distance was slowly carving cracks in our marriage. He had noticed it long before I did. The way I avoided his gaze at dinner, the way I brushed past him in the mornings, always in a rush, always carrying some excuse. And now, sitting side by side in the dim glow of our bedroom, those excuses felt too small compared to the truth that lingered between us. A part of me wondered if he had his own unspoken frustrations too. Maybe he felt neglected, maybe he questioned whether I still saw him the same way I once did. That thought tore at me. Love, after all, isn't only about the good days, it's about the days when you have nothing left to give, yet you still choose each other. But what if my silence had made him doubt my choice? What if he had been carrying a loneliness I never noticed because I was too consumed with my own? His hand was still steady on mine, but I caught the faintest flicker in his eyes, something like hurt, something like a plea he was too proud to voice. It was then I realized the conflict wasn't just about me shutting him out. It was about him fighting for a place in my world, even when I kept pushing him to the edges. That silent struggle was his way of saying he wasn't giving up, but it also reminded me that patience has limits. The night was thick with unsaid words, each one pressing at the walls of my chest. I wanted to speak, to confess the weight I carried, to ask him if he still believed in us the way I wanted to believe. But the words stayed locked inside, and the silence between us deepened into something that felt both dangerous and inevitable. The air between us grew heavier, like the silence itself was daring one of us to break it. My chest tightened as his eyes searched mine, steady and unwavering, as though he was silently demanding answers I wasn't ready to give. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, loud enough to drown out the faint hum of the lamp. Every second stretched longer than the last, and I knew this wasn't just another quiet night, it was the edge of something we couldn't step back from once we crossed. He finally spoke, his voice low, controlled, yet edged with something raw. "I feel like I'm losing you." The words cut through me like glass. I had feared them, imagined them, but hearing them spoken out loud shattered the fragile illusion I had tried to hold on to. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Losing me? The thought echoed inside my mind, bouncing against the walls of guilt and love that tangled together until I couldn't separate them anymore. I wanted to reach for him, to deny it, to assure him that he was wrong, but the truth was, I didn't even know if he was. I had built too many walls, let too many moments pass in silence, and maybe he had been standing on the other side of those walls far longer than I realized. The intensity in his eyes scared me because it wasn't just pain, it was a challenge. A demand that I stop hiding and finally face him. The room seemed smaller, the shadows deeper, as I fought to find my voice. My fingers trembled in his grasp, but he didn't let go. His grip only tightened, as though he feared I might slip away completely if he loosened it even for a second. My thoughts spun out of control. What if I couldn't fix this? What if this night became the moment that defined everything we would lose? I finally whispered, "I don't know how to explain." My words broke in the middle, fragile and unfinished, yet they hung in the air like a confession. His face shifted, pain, longing, and something I couldn't name flickered all at once. He leaned closer, his presence overwhelming, filling every inch of space I had left to retreat into. And in that moment, I knew the next breath, the next word, could decide everything. His eyes burned into mine, waiting for me to say something more, to open up the parts of myself I had kept hidden. My throat felt tight, my chest heavy, but before I could form another word, he let out a breath that sounded almost broken. Then he said something I never expected, "You're not the only one who's been carrying something." The words froze me. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt, the shadows stretching wider as if to swallow the silence that followed. I stared at him, trying to make sense of what he meant. My heart, already fragile, began to race even faster. What was he hiding? I had been so caught up in my own distance and exhaustion that I hadn't considered he might be battling something of his own. The thought unsettled me more than my own guilt. He didn't look away, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, like he was standing at the edge of a confession he wasn't sure I was ready to hear. My mind spun through possibilities. Was it about us, about his feelings, or something outside our marriage that he had kept from me? The suspense twisted my stomach into knots. I realized then that maybe the conflict between us wasn't one-sided. Maybe it wasn't just my silence that had built this distance, but something deeper he had locked away. "Then tell me," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What is it?" My question hung in the air, fragile, daring him to step through the door he had just cracked open. His jaw tightened, his fingers pressing harder around mine, as if grounding himself for what he was about to say. The intensity in his eyes shifted, still loving, still patient, but heavy with a secret. "I didn't want to burden you," he said slowly, each word carrying weight. "I saw how tired you were, how far away you felt. And I thought if I added my worries, I'd push you even further." His voice cracked slightly at the end, and it pierced through me like lightning. I had been so wrapped up in protecting him from my struggles that I hadn't realized he had been doing the exact same thing. Two people, side by side, both drowning in silence because they didn't want to hurt the other. But it didn't end there. His next words made the ground shift under me. "There are things I haven't told you. Things I've been trying to handle on my own." His eyes darkened, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just about emotions or distance anymore. There was something larger, something real and tangible behind his hesitation, something that suddenly made the night feel dangerous in a way I hadn't expected. I leaned closer, my breath unsteady. "What things?" My question came out sharper than I intended, fear dripping through it. He didn't answer right away, and that pause was worse than any confession could have been. His silence told me whatever he was holding back was big enough to change everything we thought we knew about each other. The tension stretched so tight I thought it might snap. And in that unbearable stillness, with his hand locked in mine and his secret hanging in the air, I realized we were no longer just fighting my distance, we were standing on the edge of something neither of us had seen coming. His silence stretched long enough to make my heart pound in panic. I searched his face, desperate for the truth he was holding back, until finally he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "I thought I could protect you from it, but I can't anymore." My breath caught as he pulled his hand from mine, running it across his face as though the weight of his secret had been crushing him for months. Then he looked straight at me. "I might lose my job." The words hit me like a tidal wave. All the nights he had come home distracted, all the moments I thought he was simply tired, they suddenly made sense. My exhaustion had blinded me to his. He hadn't been distant because of me, he had been carrying his own storm, afraid to add it to mine. My throat tightened as I realized how wrong I had been, shutting him out when he had needed me most. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice broke, trembling with both hurt and love. He shook his head, eyes glistening. "Because you've been carrying so much already. I didn't want to break you too." His words cracked something inside me, a sharp reminder of how fragile and strong love can be at the same time. In that moment, all the walls I had built around myself finally shattered. I reached for him, wrapping my arms around his shoulders, pulling him close as if holding him could erase all the fear between us. For the first time in months, I didn't hold back my tears. They flowed freely, soaking into his shirt, while his arms tightened around me like he was afraid to ever let go. The distance, the silence, the questions, they all broke apart in that raw embrace. We weren't two people fighting alone anymore. We were one, facing the same storm together. But just when I thought the weight had lifted, when I thought we had reached the peak of honesty, he whispered something that froze me. "There's more I need to tell you." My body stiffened in his arms as his voice trembled. "It's not just the job, there's something else I've been hiding." The warmth of the embrace turned cold in an instant. My heart, still raw from breaking open, raced with a new fear. What could be worse than what he had already confessed? The night that had begun with silence was far from over, because the truth I thought I had finally reached was only the beginning of another secret. His last words hung in the air like a shadow that wouldn't move. I pulled back just enough to see his face, my hands gripping his shoulders as if holding him tighter would force out the truth. His eyes glistened, heavy with something he had carried too long. Finally, he took a shaky breath and said, "I've been meeting with doctors. Not for me, for my father. He's been sick, and I didn't know how to tell you." The weight of it hit me differently than his first confession. This wasn't just about our marriage or his job, it was about family, about fear, about love stretched in too many directions. My heart ached, not with anger, but with regret for not noticing the signs earlier. I had been so lost in my own silence that I hadn't seen the pain he was hiding behind his. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they weren't just for me. They were for him, for us, for the struggles we had both tried to carry alone. I took his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. "You don't have to do this alone anymore," I whispered. "Not the job, not your father, not me. We'll carry it together." His shoulders sagged, as though those words released a weight he had been bracing against for too long. In that moment, I realized the conflict had never been about love fading. It was about forgetting that love isn't just about sharing joy, but also about sharing burdens. The distance we had felt wasn't because we had stopped caring. It was because we were both trying to protect each other in silence, when what we truly needed was honesty. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, letting the truth settle between us. The room felt lighter, warmer, though nothing about our problems had magically disappeared. His job was still uncertain, his father was still sick, and my own exhaustion wouldn't vanish overnight. But there was something stronger holding us now, a renewed promise that no matter how heavy life became, we wouldn't face it apart. That night taught me something I'll never forget: love doesn't disappear in silence, but it can fade if we let silence replace trust. And in the end, it wasn't my weakness that broke us open, it was our honesty that put us back together.